What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to work on the GTO's engine a little bit more, get it that bit more built up and get it that little bit closer to actually being a complete and finished engine. So the unit is absolutely peppered in refurb parts, new parts, stuff to go on this engine that have been sat around for a while I've been preparing everything for this video, because I wasn't going to do anything without showing you. So I'll take you around the unit now and I'll show you exactly what I've done to get everything ready to get it on this engine. So the ignition coil bracket's been refurbed, the coils are being cleaned and tested and you're all okay. The PTU bracket's been done. I know I haven't changed the bolts, it does annoy me as well, but I can't find bolts that fit. Engine bracket 1 finished, engine bracket 2 finished. The aluminium lightweight engine mount for the right hand side of the engine, which I didn't know it was that until I ground it down, is done. The fuel rails are being cleaned, the injectors are being split down, cleaned and resealed. The intake run is being done. The bonnet is full of mess, but it's all good mess because we've got some brand new hoses to replace all the old cracked, perished ones. We've got a new rib belt for the alternator, a new V-belt for the power steering pump. The aircon compressor's being stripped down, cleaned and checked, that seems okay. Same with the alternator, all the other brackets. Thermostat housing has a new thermostat in, which I'll show you now. So as you could expect, the old cooling system, oh, need to take the masking tape off, that was absolutely ruined. So cleaned that up, sprayed it nicely, and that one, got as much of the crappy rusty coolant out as I can. But one thing that was 100% a must on this is brand new thermostat. So when this car gets hot, that'll open up, let it cool down, and hopefully it doesn't burst the water pump, because unfortunately that is a very common problem on these cars. So if you ever go to view one to buy one and you see what looks like rust all over the gearbox or the left hand side of the engine, it's probably overheated at some point. And also check the timing belt, because chances are if it has overheated and that's burst out the reservoir, the timing belt might also have water on it off a leaky water pump. So the thermostat fits in a dream. The seal around it's nice, got a brand new gasket to go on top, and then we'll get the housing over the top and that unit will look new. And I have also got a little trick to fix these, because even though they are painted, they're corroded something terrible, so they're never going to seal on the hoses. So what I've decided to do is, I've got some barb fittings with threads on the end, so I'll drill them old ones off. I'll tap the holes and bolt those barb fittings in, so when the hoses go in, they've got something clean to bite to, so they actually seal, because the last thing I want is coolant all over the engine bay and for the engine to overheat. Power steering pump's also being gone through and that's okay. Same with the oil filter, housing, holder bracket thingy, whatever that is. And one more thing we've done, which I'm really happy with, is the cam covers, because they've come out so well, a lot better than I expected them to. And the paint on it before wasn't fantastic. So I'll show you the cam covers and I'll tell you what I did. So the cam covers came out a lot nicer than I expected them to, and I'm really happy with them, like I've just said. But one thing I did also do, as you've just seen in the video there, is once they were sprayed yellow, I went over them with a paintbrush and meticulously painted all the little raised letters on the cam cover, because it's always the little things that make the biggest difference. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run a bead of RTV sealant on the inside of the cam covers, get the gaskets on and get them on the engine, so we can get rid of this bin bag, because at the minute that is the only thing stopping all the dust from getting into the top of the engine. So now we'll get the rocker cover and we'll run a bead of sealant around the crevices on the edge of the cover for the gasket to sit into. This is purely just to help the gasket seal that little bit better, so we definitely don't end up with any oil leaks from the heads. Now we'll do the same around the spark plug holes and get the gaskets pressed in and make sure they're fully seated. Once they're fully seated, we can now get the covers on the engine and we can get them bolted down. Now we can get the bolts in, refer to the trusty whiteboard for the tightening sequence, and we can get these torqued down. So now the front rocker cover is on and I've cleaned up all the expulsion that's come out the side. I'm going to do exactly the same to the back, and that's the rocker covers on. And here it is, both rocker covers are on and I think it looks fantastic. Now we'll get the fuel rails in with the intake runner because we can get them straight in the middle and we can keep making steady progress. So before I put the intake runner on, I'm going to clean the surfaces down with some brake cleaner and a rag just to make sure there's no imperfections on the surface, and when the gasket goes on it will actually seal. Now you can put the steel gaskets on and they'll actually seal properly. Funny story about these. When I first opened the gasket kit box, I could only see in the bag that there was one of these gaskets and I needed two, and at which point I started panicking because I'd already got rid of the old ones. But then I realised very quickly when I was looking around the gaskets that both of the gaskets were just stuck together, but because of how thin they are, I didn't tell initially. Now it's in with the intake runner and we can bolt it down. Next is the fuel rails with the freshly sealed injectors, and we'll get them torqued up. And then on with the fuel rail link pipe with some fresh green O-rings. So now we've got the fuel rail and the intake runner in, as well as the link pipe between. One thing we'll do next is down here is where the oil filter housing goes. So we'll get that on with the new gasket, and then we'll move on to getting everything on the front. Now, the first thing we'll do before we get anything else done on the front of the engine is we need to get the cam belt cover in, because a lot of it goes after this, which is why it was snapped there. I have fixed it, hot stapled down the edge and up here where it was cracked, because people forget that a lot of this sits behind all the other stuff, so they try and take this off, pull it, snap it, and then it's no good. So that literally just goes on there like that with bolts. We get that bolted up, then we can get the bracket on there, and we can get all the other stuff on for the likes of the alternator, the aircon compressor, the power steering pump and all that. Get it back on. So on goes the lower cam belt cover, the upper engine mount bracket, and now for the harmonic balancer. Now I've got to try and torque this bolt up to 185 millimeters, holding the pulley with this and trying to torque with the other arm. This should be fun. What we got there? Now I think I'll do something easy like fitting a dipstick tube. So now we've got a few more of the fiddly bits in. I'm going to get the alternator bracket on, the air conditioning compressor bracket on, the engine mount brackets, and all the other big heavy stuff bolted back to the engine, and then we'll go from there. So on goes the power steering pump and belt tensioner bracket. Next is the rear engine mount, and then after that is the alternator bracket, so then all the rear mounts are on this engine. So most of the mounting brackets are now on the engine. The only issue I've got is I couldn't put the AC bracket on because there's an oil line that runs behind it, and if I get the bracket on I won't be able to get to the oil line, and I need new copper crush washers which I don't have. So it's this oil line here. So right there, an oil line goes to that, goes up and across, but these are the mounting brackets for the air conditioning compressor. So if I get the bracket on that, I can't get to the bolt behind it, put the oil line in, and that just creates more issues. So in terms of getting that bracket on, I'm going to have to wait until I've got some copper crush washers to get that oil line in to then get the AC bracket on. But in the meantime, what we can do is I can get the power steering pump on because that's behind me on the bonnet, and the mount for the power steering pump is in, so I just have to bolt it straight up, and then technically I could put the belt on it, but I'm not going to put the belt on until I do both the alternator and the power steering pump belts, so I can do them together. And I can talk you through the process of tightening them up so they're at the right tension, so the belts aren't too tight or too loose. So the engine mount bracket's in, the turbo bracket's in. I forgot about that, that's why it's rusty, because I haven't painted it. The dipstick's in, the oil filter housing bracket is in, the harmonic balance is in, the cam cover's in, the alternator bracket's on, the engine mount bracket is on, cam cover 1 and 2 are both on, the fuel rails on, along with the link pipe, whatever you call that. The intake runner's on, the rear engine crane, well sorry, that's a lifting bracket, and I think that is a mounting bracket for the likes of the throttle body and stuff like that. but they're on anyway. That is a rear engine mount, that's on. That's the back of the power steering bracket. So we're making really good progress, and now we'll get the power steering pump on, and then we'll just wait for the copper crush washers, and then we'll get the AC bracket on when they eventually turn up. So fitting the power steering pump is very simple. There's just a stud there with a nut and a washer, and then there's a big bolt that goes on the bottom. Literally just slide this over the top so it hangs on. Get your nuts and your washer on. And then swing it up, and then get that massive bolt in, and then tighten them up, and that's literally it to get the power steering pump on. So now we'll just wait for the copper crush washers, the bar brass fittings for the thermostat housing, and then when they turn up we can carry on. It's now the next day, the sun is shining and I'm feeling good. We haven't got the brass fittings for the thermostat housing, unfortunately, but what I have got is the copper crush washers for that oil feed pipe, whatever it is, but we can get that on, get the aircon compressor bracket on, and then we can continue to bolt everything else to the engine I'll plan to have on in this video. So let's get straight to it. So this hard line here is the reason why we couldn't get the air conditioning bracket on, because this bolts to this, and I didn't have any crush washers to bolt it up, otherwise I'd have had oil leaks and I couldn't have got to it once that bracket's on. So we'll get that on with new crush washers. I think this is a oil feed line to the front turbo, not 100% sure, but we'll get this on, bolt it up, get the bracket on, get the AC compressor on, we can get the alternator on, get the belts on the front, and I think that's it for this video. If you've made it this far into the video and you haven't clicked subscribe, go click the subscribe button down below, because we're building the channel up and it'll really help us out. Now that housing's aluminium, so you be careful not to over tighten there. Little strip. So now that oil feed line's on, we can get the bracket that goes here as a brace for the oil filter, this one, and then we can get the aircon compressor bracket on, and we can get everything else on. And now for the AC bracket. These two go into there, which is why I had to put that mount on first. And it goes in like that. And then get me a little template I made with the cardboard. If you haven't seen this technique before, you'll see it in this video where I used it when I was working on the engine last time. But that comes in handy because you know where all the bolts go, especially when they're all different sizes. So we'll mirror this onto there and bolt it up. Now, you can see straight up. I still don't fully know if this works, but we'll find out. So now the AC compressor's on, we'll get the alternator on, and then the two idle pulleys for the belts. That's all the spinny stuff on the front of the engine, and it's now time to get the belts on. And we need to get the belts on now for the alternator so it actually works. And the power steering pump belt as well, that needs to go on. I am aware I haven't put the exhaust manifolds on yet, or the turbos. I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing with them yet. I know I've made it harder for myself in the future, but I'll get it in. So let's get these belts on. So now it's time to get the belts on, and before I put the alternator belt on, I need to put the power steering belt on first, because that runs on a smaller pulley behind this big harmonic balancer for the alternator. So the power steering belt on this, I did mention in my first video, I think it was, that one. It's a V belt. The shape of the belt, when you look at the side, is a V, or a V. So this runs on a different pulley to this, whereas this for the alternator runs on what's called a rib belt. So there's multiple little ribs inside the belt, and you need to make sure they're all on straight across all of the main pulleys throughout. The backside run on these so they're smooth, doesn't make a difference. But anyway, we'll get to that. The power steering pump just goes over the harmonic balancer onto the rear pulley, over the top, and then over the power steering pump. Now that the belt's on and the tension is back on, I'm going to use the square end of an extension bar, get it in like so, leverage it up, you see the hole comes in, get the tension and bolts in there. Now that the belt's on, it's already quite tight because it hasn't got no stretch in it. Gonna just get this back in, apply a little bit of pressure just to swing it up, tighten this tension and bolt up. That's tight. And then this one. Again, that's tight. Now that belt is on. It's got a nice bit of flex in it. I'll check the manual to see how much it's supposed to have. Now we can get the alternator belt on and adjust them all properly. So the aircon and the alternator belt is a similar process, but it routes a bit of a different way. Some of these engines that don't have the air conditioning, obviously it just goes straight past that. So it goes from this tensioner, it rolls up, round, under and over. Because this has got the AC, it goes around, over, under, up onto the alternator, down and back around. Let's get it on. And this bolt here at the back, there's a little arm on it. I'll zoom in so you can see it. There's a little arm, and as you tighten this bolt, that arm comes up. As you loosen it, the arm comes down. This bolts to that arm, and as it moves up and down, it's what applies the tension to the belt to keep it all nice and taut. So at the minute, I'm just going to loosen it off to get it as low as I can. And then when I get the pulley on, I'll tighten it back up, and that'll give me the tension on the belt. So that pulley's in loosely, and I will tighten the bolt at the top, this one here. See how it moves when I move the pulley? That's because it pulls this up. So we'll tighten that down to there just while it's in position. Then we can tighten that up, get the belt under the right deflection, which I assume is how much it moves from top to bottom. Get that all right, and then that's both belts on the front of the engine. It's so weird to see how much of it's going back together. We're getting there. So that's up tight. Get this in. Just get it nipped, but not tight. Now we'll get a smaller ratchet in with a 12mm on it. You see the deflection in the belt now. There's a fair bit of slack in it. So we'll get on this and tighten it up. You can feel the belt getting tighter. So we'll go through the manual, we'll see how much deflection it's supposed to have, which indicates how tight it is. And there's a few different ways to tighten belts up like this. So some manufacturers do it off deflection, which is the distance between the highest point of the belt and the lowest point once it's pressed upon. But Lamborghini do it off frequency, you know, as if you're playing a guitar, you strum it and it gives off a frequency. So they work that way, which is a bit odd, but I think for simplicity, Mitsubishi do it with a deflection distance. So we'll look at that and we'll get it taut. So now that the belts are on, I've tightened them to the right specification based on the deflection. I just used the tape measure, got it next to it, and it was within the tolerance. So they're on now. So the last thing I'm going to do is put the cam covers on, and that's going to round this video off quite nicely. So now the cam belt covers are on, I lied. We're going to get the spark plugs in as well, along with the HT leads, and get that bracket bolted to the side of the engine, just so I can remove the tissue out the front. And they're going in anyway, so we might as well do it now. I've also bought some fancy upgraded ones. So what I've got for this engine is some of the NGK iridium plugs, because you get a better spark with iridium, and you don't have to gap them because they're already pre-gapped. But we'll get all 6 of these in. We'll get the HT leads on, that bolted to the side of the engine, and then that is actually when the video is finished. So let's get straight into it. So now I can gently insert the spark plugs and I'll get them torqued up. And yes, I do torque my spark plugs. You can come at me in the comments, but at least I know I won't strip them out. So that's the new iridium spark plugs in the GTO's engine. It's now time to get the coil packs in, not the coil packs, HT leads in. Bolt the coil packs to the side of the engine on that bracket, and then that's everything. The first thing we'll do to get the HT leads in is this little guides that need to go in the front. After cleaning the leads up and getting all the dirt and grime off them, the leads are numbered, which makes this process so much easier, because all your evens are on the back and all your odds are on the front, and they'll only go in one position because of how long the leads actually are. So we'll start with the rears. We need to get the cable clips in. So this one on the lead here is labeled number 2, which is this cylinder. This one is number 4. And this one is number 6. So in this side we've got 1, then we've got 3, and then 5. And now to get the coil pack on. So I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but on the tops of the coil pack there are stamped numbers, and I only found them when I took all the rust off to paint it. But those stamped numbers indicate what cylinders go to what part of which coil. So what we'll do is we can get this bolted up and we can get all the coils put on based on those stamped numbers. Number 1 comes here. There it is. Number 3. That is number 5. Coil 4 in. 4. 2. Now that the HT leads are in and the coil packs are bolted back on and everything's wired up, I'll neaten the cables up so it looks all pretty. Then all the coil cable management looks spot on, and I couldn't be happier with the way it's turning out. So now all the ignition plugs are in, all the coil packs are bolted up, all the spark plugs are in, and the engine again is looking so much more put together. I do still need to get the thermostat housing on, but I can't do that until the brass fittings have turned up, which they should be here within the next week, hopefully. Then we can get that housing fitted there, because that's the only thing missing on this side of the engine. And then we can get all the other things in, like the heater matrix lines, the fuel lines, the vacuum lines, and all the turbo stuff, because hopefully by then I figured out what I'm going to do with it. That's going to be everything for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a bit of a lengthy process, but you can see where we are with it now, and it's getting so exciting because it's not long till this engine's in the car, and hopefully it doesn't go bang when we turn it on. I have faith. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Hit that notifications bell so you get an update every time I post a video, whether it be on the GTO or the TT. And I'll see you in the next one.
Do you lie awake at night? Are you afraid to turn out the lights?